Hi everyone, welcome to Art of the Unquiet Grave. If you're new here, I'm Ash, and today I'm going to let you in on a little secret. As I'm shooting this, it's the beginning of February, so that means that Valentine's Day is quickly approaching. And the secret is, I kind of like Valentine's Day. I hate to admit it, but I'm sort of secretly like a diehard romantic. Don't get me wrong, it's not the usual like pink, romantic, fluffy rom-com sort of situation. That's not me. But I do love a good tragic romance, which probably explains a lot about my teenage dating years. But anyway, I digress. So today's video is an exciting one for me because it's actually going to be a little bit of a throwback to the very beginning origins of my channel. If anybody happened to see my very first video that I ever put up on YouTube, almost 6 years ago now, it was a Valentine's Day / Valloween greeting card of an anatomical heart in a jar. So I thought, since I just recently brought my channel back from the dead, if you will, that it might be fun to kind of revisit that concept, but this time to make it like a 3D giftable version of an anatomical heart in a jar. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So I'll go ahead and jump into that now, and I will see you at the end for the reveal. Okay, so we're going to start with some aluminum foil here, and we're going to wad that up into a ball that's roughly the size and shape of our fist. So anatomically, they say that your heart's supposed to be roughly the size of your fist, so that's what I'm using for a jumping off point here. But obviously you could make it on a much larger scale or a smaller scale depending on what kind of vessel you're going to be putting it in. But once I got a ball of aluminum foil that was roughly the size of my own fist, then I went and started conditioning my polymer clay. So you're just going to kind of knead it between your hands until it warms up and becomes more malleable. Then I used my daughter's Play-Doh roller and rolled it out into a thin sheet until it was very flexible. So you can see here that I can sort of manipulate it with my fingers, and it has a lot of bend and give, which is great. So now that we have that conditioned, we're going to roll our aluminum foil ball, which kind of looks like a baked potato at this point. And we're going to roll it up in that polymer clay and smooth out the seams. Now this doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. We're going to be adding a lot of texture to this later, but you can go ahead and smooth it out as much as you'd like. And then I'm going to take some smaller strips of polymer clay and roll them into these sort of like trumpet shapes. And that's going to be for our arteries and our aorta and our larger veins. So you can use the tip of your finger there to sort of give it more structure as you're smoothing out the seams on the side. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to do that several more times to make our arteries, and then you're going to attach them the same way. So you're just going to sort of smooth them out onto the base of our heart there to attach them. If you found that you were having a hard time getting them to stick, you can use liquid Sculpey or a different brand of liquid polymer clay, and that'll sort of help your additional pieces to adhere to each other. But typically I find if you condition your clay enough, so meaning that it's very flexible and smooth, you can usually get them to stick without it. So unless you're an expert at anatomy, which I am certainly not, I find that having a reference picture up while you're sculpting a heart is tremendously helpful. I've sculpted, like, I don't even know, probably 20 anatomical hearts in my time. But still, there's always things that I forget about in nuances since I am not a doctor. Shocking, I know. But you can go ahead and pull up some sort of anatomy chart, and it'll help make this process a lot easier. But obviously it doesn't have to be completely anatomically correct, and mine certainly isn't. But just, enough to get the point across of what you're going for. Now, in the past, I made like a giant anatomical heart one time, but it was not a human anatomical heart. It was a vampire heart that was based off of the Strain TV show, if anybody's seen that. So it was a huge parasitic worm-ridden vampire heart. So you can use this as like a jumping off point to kind of run wild with it. You don't have to just stick to a normal, boring human heart if you don't want to. So here I'm just making another aluminum foil structure for an armature for our aortic arch. Since that was like a little bit of a beefier addition to the heart here, I just felt like I needed some additional structure so it didn't collapse on itself while I was attaching it to the base here. So now I'm just sort of wedging it underneath that additional piece of polymer clay that's on the heart already and smoothing it out. So when you have like a thinner aluminum structure underneath, you should be able to bend it, and then that's what I'm doing here to give us our aortic arch. And then once we get all of our arteries and our larger veins attached here, then comes the fun part of this, I think, which is my favorite part, which is adding the additional texture in the smaller veins. So we're going to get to that in a second here. Okay, so now here's the time that we're adding those additional details and texture. So I just have like a polymer clay sculpting tool set. I think they also use this for like wax carving for candles. And we're just going to take like a pick tool here and add some additional lines and add some texture to the heart. So again, you know, reference pictures, your best friend here, so you can kind of, you know, take a look and see what additional textures you need on which parts of the heart. But I'm kind of just scoring it mostly with that pick tool. And then adding some extra texture, easy for me to say, with a piece of aluminum foil, which is one of my favorite tricks for working with polymer clay. And what that'll do is just give us some additional like structure and places on the heart where we can shade later to give it, you know, a more realistic appearance. Now here's my favorite part. So we're just adding some polymer clay snakes, if you will, and then we're attaching them to the heart and smoothing them out with one of those pick sculpting tools, and those are going to be our smaller veins. Now I'm using some acrylic paint to color our heart. I'm using a dark blue, red, brown, black, and a white, and I'm just sort of mixing the shades to my heart's content, pun intended. So I'm starting with like I'm gonna make like a burgundy color here, and I'm painting that all over the base of our heart. Now, technically, since this is going to be a wet specimen, it wouldn't be full of blood still. It would be like, you know, exsanguinated, and they kind of look like just fatty blobs when they're in wet specimen jars. But obviously, I didn't want to lose the heart appearance, and this is supposed to be a Valentine's Day project. So I did stick with a redder color than would be like accurate. But, you know, creative liberties, right? So we did that dark red base, and then I painted some highlight, like a grayish sort of color on top. And now we're going back in with a darker red, mostly a brown based like wash, to get into all those crevices of the texture that we added. So this is what we have, and the paint job is done. So now we're going to move on to the resin. So I got this giant jar at Goodwill, and I'm just going to take some super glue and attach the heart to the bottom of the jar there so it doesn't start floating when we add the resin. So this was like a 2-to-1 mixture of deep pour resin. So obviously follow the instructions for whatever kind of resin you're using, but I'll try to link this down below if you're interested in this particular brand that I got off of Amazon. So I went ahead and I poured in part A and part B according to the instructions, and now I'm just going to mix it. Until it said to mix it until there weren't any visible swirls. And then once that was done and I waited for some bubbles to rise to the top, I used this resin colorant that I also got off of Amazon in the shade Apricot. So it's going to make it look like an older wet specimen with like that amber fluid. That's what we're going for anyway. And I basically ended up using all the resin that came in that kit. So I mixed this quite a few times since I didn't have like a bigger mixing vessel. So then after that resin was all poured, then we started moving on to the more Valloween, Valentine's-y part of this project, and we added some ribbon to make it look like a gift. So obviously you can skip this part if you just want it for like a gaff oddity, you know, fake wet specimen. But since we're doing Valentine's here, we added some velvet ribbon and some heart ribbon that I got from Dollar Tree, which was a big hit with Arthur here, as you can see. And I just wrapped that around the neck of the jar there and attached it with a little bit of hot glue so it didn't spin. Now I'm just tying a fancy bow, which was not fancy at all. Fun fact, I still use the bunny ears method from preschool, so, you know, whatever works, right? And then we're just going to snip off the ends. Dear Valentine, you said that I would always have your heart. And now, I always will. So we finally made it to the end of this project. When I tell you that this project didn't want to be made, I'm not exaggerating. For whatever reason, I had so many issues with this one. I had audio recording issues, I had supply issues. I ordered supplies and they didn't show up because of the inclement weather that we were having. Anyway, it's been a process, but we finally got there in the end, and I'm so excited that it actually worked. This was my first time using deep pour resin, and I had hesitations or reservations that I was mixing the resin correctly, but it actually ended up curing. And now I have a fun new tool to play with to make gaff or wet specimens. So when I started my oddities collection, like almost 10 years ago, I had a bunch of wet specimens. However, the last time I moved, I had them packed really securely and really well, but unfortunately, a couple of them ended up leaking, which is not what you want with wet specimens, obviously. Fortunately, they were in alcohol and not formaldehyde, because that would have been a much bigger issue, obviously. But now that kind of put me off to collecting wet specimens, and for whatever reason, I just had a hard time finding a human heart to stick in a jar. So now I have one, and I'm very excited about that. So let me go ahead and show you without blinding you with the ring light, hopefully. There it is. Ta-da! Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this project, and as a little throwback to my first greeting card video that I posted on YouTube. And I'm very excited to show you what we have coming up. The next project is going to be Ouija board related, but I won't spoil that just yet. So I will wish you a very happy Valentine's Day and a happy Valloween, and I will see you soon with another video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to my little channel, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.